the favorite things he loved to do in different portions of his life. Right now, we're gonna have Amber come up here, and she's gonna read the obituary. So you want me to hold that, or how you want me? You got it?
All right, I'm gonna do the obituary. Can you hear everything from here? Okay, sweet. All right. Okay, I'm gonna show you.
Hold
to
on
everyone in the
one.
audience, okay, so you can kind of see everybody.
Why don't you come over
Okay, so
here?
Chris is calling us from. Oh,
You
sorry.
come over here, that way you can
Got
use
it.
this one, this mic here.
Okay. All right, here we go. Harold Lewis Lowry was born on December 27th, 1942, at the age of 80. He lived in Florence.
Hold on one second.
Hang on a second, Chris, can you hear me? I know you can hear me, but the mic isn't. There we go. Okay, we're going to start over. Harold Lewis Lowry was born on December 27th, 1942. At the age of 80, he passed away. He lived in Florence, Arizona, sadly left us on September 19th, 2023. Following a bout of cancer in the lungs, Harold survived his son, Christopher Lowry. His mother, Charlotte, and his father, Louis, and his sister, Barbara, are all deceased. He loved fishing and camping. He was in the Army and the National Guard. He worked as a tire salesman at Goodyear and Treadco and retired from Treadco, but also was an entrepreneur and had many other jobs in the works. He was a man of God and loved his family and friends, especially his son. He would do anything for anyone, but was also a private man and a little stubborn. He loved jazz, but lived a simple life. That's a little bit of what I wrote about Jim. He was a little stubborn. That is true. But his heart was a heart of gold. He would have done anything for anyone at any time. As a matter of fact, from what we're going to hear today, he's helped out quite a few schools and the church here and a lot of people in his community. So it's going to be awesome to hear those stories. So back to you, Pastor. This is fun.
Hi, Chris. Hi there. So right now is going to be one of those two songs that were selected called I Drive Your Truck. Okay.
$0.89 in the ashtray, half-empty bottle of Gatorade rolling in the floorboard. That dirty Braves cap on the dash, dog tags hanging from the rear view, old skull can and cowboy boots, and a gold army shirt folded in the back. This thing burns gas like crazy, but that's alright. People got their ways of coping, oh, and I got mine. I drive your truck, I roll every window down, and I burn up every back road in this town. I find a field, I tear it up till all the pain's a cloud of dust. Yes, sometimes I drive your truck. I leave that radio playing, same old country station where you left it. Yeah, man, I crank it up, and you'd probably punch my arm right now if you saw this tear rolling down on my face. Hey man, I'm trying to be tough, and Mama asked me this morning if I'd been by your grave, but that flag and stone ain't drive your truck. I roll every window down and I burn up every back road in this town. I find a field, I tear it up till all the pain's a cloud of dust. Yes, sometimes I drive your truck. I've cussed, I prayed, I've said goodbye, shook my fist and asked God why. These days when I'm missing you this much, I drive your truck. I roll every window down and I burn up every back road in this town. I find a field, I tear it up till all the pain's a cloud of dust. Yes, sometimes, brother, sometimes I drive your truck. I drive your truck. I hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind. I drive your truck.
Good pick, Chris. Good pick. Well, actually, Chris has the next part of the service here. Is he's going to, well, we're waiting to see. Is it going to be the eulogy or the poem first?
We'll do the poem first.
Okay.
You want to do the poem first? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to turn you around so that you can see people. All right, you're up.
All right, can everybody hear me? Okay. All right, here we go. Long, long, long ago, you saw me and knew you held my hand. Even once Harold was born, you still knew you held my hand. He loved and lost and recognized the cost, but you knew you held my hand. You gave him joy and peace and gave him ease, but you knew you held my hand. Like Abraham, he couldn't see the plan, but you knew you held my hand. Age continues to pass and a baby seems last, but you knew you held my hand. Nothing could stop his dream nor make me not be seen, but you knew you held my hand. He marries Bonnie Louise and they hope for me, but you knew you held my hand. Here I come, then crawl, walk, or run. I am your son, and you held my hand. Whether here or there, to keep from scare, you held my hand. All grown up, I didn't need that stuff, so you held my hand. Dad had to let go. I'm a man through growth, but you know you held my hand. I really found the faith, and you put away hate, but you know you held my hand. His last few breaths, approaching death, there's nothing left. You held my hand. I heard his breath stopped. I didn't cry at the loss. You held my hand. I hope you can say today, tomorrow, and another day, you held my hand. That's all, everybody, for the poem portion.
All right.
Amber,
Yeah.
Amber, I'm gonna have to call you back real quick because the thing's about to shut off.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, bye. stop, I'll follow through, and so I can finish it for you, okay?
Okay. Well, I can stay the whole time, so I can just call you back real quick.
Yeah, no worries. All right, let's,
Okay.
you're up.
Here we go. Good morning. God bless you all, and thank you for coming. All right. Harold Lewis Lowry was born on December 27th, 1942. He was born to Lewis Samuel Lowry and Charlotte Eloise Lewis. Excuse me. He grew up in Pendleton, Oregon until his mother did what was best for the both of them and left his abusive father, Lewis. The man that Dad would call father from appreciation and love and trust came into his life at about 8 years old. Not long after, they moved with Dad to Costa Rica, which was a real big thing for my dad. The sights and all that he experienced were different than what most, if not all of us, grew up experiencing. It only lasted for about 2 years, 2 great years. They returned to the U.S. and lived in Arizona for another few years, too. My dad moved to California and lived in Costa Mesa for the rest of his younger years into his adult years. Somewhere in the time of his 15th year, my Aunt Barbara was born. Sadly, this was after my dad's father had left because of his mother. This should be seen as a time of turmoil because my grandma Charlotte would date one after another, and my dad had an unstable life in his mid to latter teens. During this time, when my dad was 16, and for a couple years, my dad had his first job as a dory boat operator and fisherman. Let's see here. My dad was an avid fisherman, and he had a lot of good times out on the sea. See, this is very important because he would always want to take me out on short dinghies to go fish with him once when I was of age. It scared the heck out of me to do it, but we did once. I love the ocean now, but it still needs to be 20 feet or longer unless we're on a lake. Anywho, once my dad was done with the dory boats, he entered the Army Reserves and worked all the way to a Spec 5 after his 4-year term. This was divine intervention because he was called in the draft during Vietnam, but he didn't have to go because he was already in the reserves. He excelled in what he did there, rising to be inspected by full bird colonels regularly. With the stand-up service that was given, he was being shaped and molded by honor, integrity, loyalty, and camaraderie. These define a man's character, and they put to test each man's will among their fiery trials, something that my dad soared with and carried with himself through the rest of his life and instilled in my life all these years. He really wanted a reservist life for me, too, with me going through JROTC for the Air Force. I was set against it when it might have been an option. Now I see that an option is presented for a directive, and in this case, a better course through life. Always to be prosperous and transformed into servicemen and women for life's great duties. Once Dad came home to Costa Mesa, he got a place of his own, and within a few years, he found a tragedy. His mother, Charlotte, passed one night, and his 15-year-old sister, Barbara, had to walk all the way to his house to tell my dad he had to take care of her now, and that Mom had passed. This was at 30 years old. He was surprised, but now he got some training in raising his kid sister. Grandma Charlotte was gone, and I think that impacted them more than they might have let on. Plus, they had to deal with the fact that my dad was not a father, and she was not being nurtured by a mother. But they made it through it until they were able to graduate to another stage of life and rise to the occasions that life still had to offer them. During his 30s, the call for service brought my dad to being harbor patrol for a time. This was another responsibility that required tip-top performance, and my dad excelled there too. I don't know exactly how long he served in this field, but he did well. Sometime in his latter 30s and into his 40s, my dad started a great career with Goodyear Tire. He would work for them for almost 2 decades. In the meantime, 1985 rolls around, and my mom, Bonnie L. Collins, marries him and becomes Bonnie Louise Lowry. She made him really happy, and that only blossomed more once she gave birth to their bundle of joy, who was the most special and sweet and quiet and peaceful and wonderful baby boy. ... me. Just kidding. But it was me. My mom did for my dad what former loves had not been able to do. She gave him a child. I would be my mom's and dad's last child. I was my mom's only son and dad's only child. My mom had 3 girls through her first husband, whom are my sisters. My dad had 2 prior marriages, but no kids. I was blessed to have them and to be in their good graces. Their focus was on me and raising me to be a blessing to our society. I wasn't always, but now will be. As long as I can remember, my parents were there and everything. They saw wonderful things for me and wanted the best in all things, especially in schooling, because they wanted me to go to college one day. It has happened now, and I have an AA in theology as well. I'm glad I could honor my father by making one of his wishes for me come to pass, and with honors too. I'm going to make it all the way to honor the Lord first and his wishes and plans for me too. Ultimately, I do it for the Lord. As these years went by with my dad and mom, I saw love in action until I was about 8 or 9 when my mom and dad filed for bankruptcy. This trial of fire was the beginning of the end for mom and dad. They stayed separated from each other so the courts wouldn't get involved with me or with raising me. My mom had began living with friends she knew in Corona, California because it was closer to her work. My dad and I remained in Moreno Valley, and mom came to see me regularly twice a week. I love my dad very much for how he was there to support me, and all the years that he did went away when I broke dad's heart by running away to another state in the Midwest and not caring about all he had invested in me. He always said it would be me and him if I didn't get into college right out of school. Well, it started to look that way because my grades were slipping. That's partly because of football, and I didn't know what to do. So a friend and I ran away to East St. Louis, Illinois. His family was receptive, and it was a big change, and I thought that that would be my future. But my friend and I came back 3 months later with open arms from mom and dad for my friend and I. However, I got right back in school, and I still managed to graduate and walk even. I graduated with 50 extra credits, which made my dad happy at least. I came back with 2 vices, smoking weed and drinking beer and liquor. My dad always suspected it but couldn't put a finger on it. He let things slide more once I came back. Within 6 months, I was an adult, and at the end of 2004, he loved that I had a job at Subway, and he was even willing to let me go to Hawaii with a close friend and his family. He kept giving and bending for me, and I kept conning and taking. My vices were the wedge to drive us apart, and the attitude that came with all of it. Rebellious, haughty, proud, and very, very self-willed. I drugged my dad and my mom through all of it, even though my mother was living in Minnesota with a friend of hers. And mom and dad were finally divorced too. It bothered me some. So dad was happy that I had a job with a logistics company. Though I was work-oriented, I was trying to make money illegally too. It hit me hard, and my dad was there all the way through all the way, and even through my criminalistic endeavors. I went through breaking an arm on the job, getting jumped in, my car stolen, and then once I got it back, I totaled it. He came and picked me up on each instance and dished out money for each event. He loved me while I didn't know how to love nor care to do so. Since these 3 things happened, I was scared, stupid, and considering things that only would make life all the more worse and devastating. These things could have easily got both my dad and me hurt very bad. And when I told him, he kept telling me that he was going to trust the Lord. I didn't have a grasp on anything other than knowing that Christ died for us and my sins were forgiven. I'm inserting this part, but that's what we would all hope that we have settled in our hearts. These things could have easily got... Okay. I didn't have a grasp on anything other than knowing that Christ died for us and my sins were forgiven. Dad tried to share with me more at times, but my heart was still hard and stony. I wouldn't go to church anymore, and now I had dragged my dad through the mud again. Even though the love of God prevailed with my dad towards me, I made him hate me for a time because of my actions. That brought me here and my attitude toward him the whole way through. Because of my foolishness, I had to leave. Dad was able to sell the house and left too. Plus his entrepreneurial endeavors as his own truck tire business. I destroyed his success in one foul swoop. He never returned to it either. I was doing better, but my mindset would cause us to almost get into a fight at one point while I was running up from the police. However, every time that I needed something, love pushed aside the hatred, and he went above and beyond, stealing, even though I was having turmoil in my spiritual life. Though I tried to attend church, I was starting to stop caring again. That's what I was doing the whole time before, but I believe my dad could see through it again. Me not caring was hurting everything, and sadly my dad as well. The big hurt came next. I got arrested and have been away for almost 17 years. The arrest hurt us and broke me too, but I was healed and mended by the Lord, which was what Dad couldn't do specifically. I needed God's grace, peace, and nurturing for this road. He used my dad and my family and a friend too. I made other friends whom helped me be a caring son to him and love him all the more. We finally found a greater bond with him because now we were ministering to each other instead of in one ear and out the other. I said all that to say this, and that is love is what my dad exhibited to me and others. It never ceased, but was shrouded some to protect himself from me. But as soon as I was as keen for help, asking for help, my dad was right there to give a helping hand. For the past 17 years, I've been loving God first, and I had to learn how to love others God's way. I know that Dad knows that now, and even more too. We need to always examine ourselves because if we love others and one another, we have God. The world sees, and we see for ourselves of the wonderful gift, the greatest gift. 1 Corinthians 13:13. I loved him, and he loved me. I still love him. Thanks for God's love through him and brother and disciple, one set free. You can read 1 John chapters 3, 4, and 5 for more about showing love. God bless y'all and live to love like my dad did. Godspeed in your love walk. God bless you all. That's all, Amber.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving me some time to talk about Jim Lowry. My wife said it best this morning, and it's a short phrase, but it's very deep and very poignant when you really think about it. And she said, as she was talking to the ladies earlier this morning, Jim was such a blessing. And if you take the term blessing, I mean, what does that mean? We're not going to spend, well, we could, but then I'd have to give you a break at the 30-minute part, and we don't have that much time. Jim Lowry was a blessing. I was blessed to have him as part of the Tuesday morning men's Bible study group. And he was not a laid-back kind of participant. And when Jim Lowry stood up to make a point, you knew that was a point that needed to be paid attention to, because he wouldn't stand up ordinarily, and he had insights, and he had not only the insights, but he had the conviction and the living it out that just spoke volumes and blessed, again, the term blessing, the rest of us. But it didn't take long, if you knew Jim Lowry, to know a number of things about him. Some have already been enumerated here prior, but I wrote them down just so I could be brief. If you knew Jim Lowry, you knew that he loved Jesus. And not only loved him in word, but also loved him in deed. Jim loved to study God's word. He had a quiet time. The Tuesday morning studies that I mentioned were all evidence of that. He also loved people. And sometimes his tough love manifested itself in a number of ways, but there was no doubt that a deep caring and love was behind his comments to you. He loved people, and that my wife had COVID, and he was checking on us before COVID, but he would check on us routinely. He would ask me on Tuesday mornings, how's Julia doing? Is she breathing any better? How's she doing? And it wasn't yeah, Joe, how's your wife doing? It was, how's Julia doing? Tell me about Julia. And I would give him the updates. Some of them were good. Some of them were not so good. And he had a desire to see people grow in the Lord. He was concerned about others' salvation. He was concerned about others that they got their theology right. Because if he thought it was just by doing good things, that's not the way to Jesus. The way to Jesus, he would say repeatedly, is with that personal relationship. And I've got some emails that he sent me for my professional development. Most of them solicited and some of them not solicited, but they were all beneficial. And he had a sense of humor. In the midst of all that, in the midst of his focus, in the midst of his caring and concern, there was a sense of humor. So my professional development, his sense of humor will come out in some of the titles of these, just a couple emails that he sent. And these are the titles: Joe Legal versus Joe Illegal. Delivery. You know how politics work? This was one that really got me. Churches and squirrels. Churches and squirrels. And then there's the modern Christians and the Old Testament diet. Modern Christians and the Old Testament diet. Batteries. The rise of India. Court recorders. I used to be a normal person. So Jim was a blessing. We miss him. We will miss him. But we have an assurance that we will see him again, and praise the God in heaven that he's given us that vehicle. Bless you guys, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Smitty. Who's next? Come on up, Pastor.
Well, good morning. I'm Pastor Leo of Enduring Faith Fellowship, but my roots come from here at Calvary Chapel. That's where I got to know Jim. And so Jim was one of those guys that, first of all, when I met him, he and my wife had something in common. Are you really paying attention to me when I'm talking to you? Because he wanted that eye contact. He wanted to know that you were there. And I know there was a couple times when he was talking to me, oh, yeah, I'll talk to you later when you have more time. But then there was this one time when he came and talked to me, and he says, Leo, I really want to do something for the kids in Eloy. He knew I taught out in school in this community. And he had a heart for the kids that were less fortunate, that they would not end up in situation. And I always say what man meant for evil, God meant for good. And God uses situations in our lives to really bring restoration and bring healing in our lives. And so he told me a little bit about his son, and he told me that he really had a heart to help these kids in Eloy. So he went and got his fingerprint clearance card. He went and got all his paperwork together. And he went out and helped in kindergarten classes, in first grade classes. And he would set out the papers, and he would do things and help the kids. And he would help with some of these boys that were pretty difficult in some of the classes. And I taught first grade for probably 12, 13 years, so I know how how restless some of these kids are. But he had a heart, and he was faithful. And his faithfulness showed not only in the students, but also in the staff. And I just thank God for his life, because he encouraged me. You know, the roads that we go through in our own life, the journeys that we have, and the things that he shared. And so I just want to encourage you, Chris, that your life has made an investment also in these kids' lives, because he really wanted these kids. When you talked about grades and things, he wanted them to be on track, and he wanted to help them to learn how to read. So I thank God for the journey of getting to know Jim.
He said thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Come on up.
I want to get up here before my husband gets up here, because he's made lots of notes. Anyway, all the things that have been said are absolutely 100% true. And I just wanted to give you a couple of experiences of mine. Jim was a dear friend that would help anybody. They didn't have to ask. He was there to help before they asked. And that was one of the things I loved about him. And my husband's going to have some stories about that experience. One of the things I loved about Jim was his love for the church here, and his growth and development in loving the Sabbath and the beginning of the Sabbath. And we would have dinner together and prayers, and that became so important to Jim. No matter what excuse I would start coming up with, oh, I don't feel good, Jim. I don't have anything to cook. I don't have room for that many people. Whatever it was, Jim would step up there and he'd say, my house. Don't worry about it. I'll make whatever. So he was the number one support to make sure that we started the Sabbath and that everyone was there. And I really, really loved that about him, the support that he would give other people. One of the things that I enjoyed most about Jim is what people have already expressed is his theology and the discussion of points, and we had that many, many times. And I just want to say here and now I'm really mad because now Jim won. He got all the answers before I did. So anyway, I loved Jim. I loved everything about him, his spunk, his heart, his energy, and yeah, we're really going to miss him. Who's next?
Thank you. Come on up.
Thank you. My name is Jerome. For a lot of you that don't know me and some of you that do and wished you hadn't, Jim and I got started. He sold me a toolbox, and I told him that I was concerned that I may not be able to pay him, and he said, "Oh yeah, you'll pay me." That's the way it started. And then from there, he had lost his keys for his camper and stuff, and there was a birthday party right next door. I said, "I can open those locks for you if you want, but it's not going to be good." So him and I may have gotten exiled because of that. I know I did, and a lot of people thought I was just the nicest person, but I'd taken a right angle cutter and I cut off 3 locks in a row while they were trying to have a birthday party or some party next door, and that was wonderful. So then from there, we went back to Montana. He came up to visit. He pulled his camper up there, and he expressed that he had a leak in the floor of the camper. So I fixed it. Just jumped in, fixed it, didn't question anything. He wanted to pay for it. That wasn't the way we do stuff. So then, from there, let's see, I helped him with a few other things, as air conditioner, water filters, various things as we were going on. And again, he was increasing in the Sabbath and stuff, and he just kept wanting to be together. And I think that was his reaching out. And he would always tell me that, we may have a different approach of getting to the same God, but that's what we're doing. So we continued our journey together, and at a point I was going back to Montana to have hernia surgery. I call it double sidewalls. So my wife said no, I needed to change and come back, do it down here in Arizona. I said absolutely not. And she said that she wanted to come up, and I said absolutely not. This is my project, I'll take care of it. Jim said he was flying up. I said absolutely not. He flew up anyway. So he came in the day of the surgery, and he got a chance to meet Catherine's son. Their birthdays were on the same day. So they had a great witness together. And of course, me being me, after surgery, the doctor was going to give me different pain medicines than what we had agreed to. So I refused to take the last shot to get out of the hospital. And after several hours, Catherine's son came up and asked me, "How's this working for you?" And I said, "Not worth a crap." So anyway, I took the last shot, and they released me. Jim and I went from there. I was feeling pretty good, so we went over to visit people, Gloria's house. And when we were doing the oxygen test, I had failed. I was that little thing you slide on your finger. We tried it on several people, and I just kept failing. So Jim and I went back to the hospital and went to the ER. They checked me. They gave me another shot for pain. This is about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then they had an emergency at the hospital. So we just got up and left. Went home and said, "Call us if there's any problems." We got back to the house, and I took a oxycodone for the pain. That's about 5, well, close to 7. At 11 o'clock, I took another pain pill, and we went to bed. He slept on the couch. I slept in the bedroom. And somewhere around 1 o'clock in the morning, I got up and I read the instructions on the bottle. It says 1 every 6 hours. I saw the 6, so I took 6. And about, I'm going to say 6 o'clock in the morning, Jim had a vision that I was on the bed, stretched out dead. He came back, beat on the door, and I crawled out of a hole. And that was I guess a real bonding, because I've always claimed that he saved my life, and I really think he did. From there, he would come over and visit all the time, and he'd stop by, and he'd always depart with me calling me an ass because of where I was at. So he just kept it up, and then finally we got down to the point where I could help him. He needed a stove, his kitchen stove replaced, so, well, I guess his furnace, his air conditioner on top of the trailer. But I did those things, and I just did them for him because it was just an honor to do anything I could for him. So from there, when I installed his kitchen stove, I said I'd install it if he'd give us the old one so we could put it in our house because we didn't have an oven that worked. And he came back with, well, they had a really great deal on this stove, so I bought two. So that way, Catherine would have a new oven. So anyway, we continued from there, and he got to the point where he was afraid to tell me anything that was wrong in the house because I'd fix it for him before he knew it. And we just grew that way. And then, as we progressed, he had called a couple of the ladies, I think Marie and Catherine and Elaine, and he called them, and they said that there was something wrong with him, and they didn't know what. I walked over to his house, and when I saw him, I said, we're going to the ER right now. So I took him in there. This was kind of fun. I took him in there, and I drove him in my truck, and he didn't like that. That was bad. Needed to be his truck. So anyway, when we got in there, he's in the ER, and they give him an IV, and that's usually what they do with my mother-in-law, and it's like day and night. The person is back. So he came back, doctor came in and said, I can't believe your recovery. And I told him that the experience we've had with my mother-in-law, and he said, I'll go start writing up papers to get you out. Well, the nurse horsed around, so he pulled all of his IVs out, and lo and behold, we walk out of the ER. And I'm going like, whoa, you're just kind of crazy. And I didn't realize that I had given him a bad example in Billings when we walked out of the ER. And it took a long time for me to figure that out. So then he recovered. We went back, and that was on a night of the Sabbath. He said, we're getting out of here. We're going to the Sabbath. So we went to the Sabbath, or start of the Sabbath. The next time I had to take him in, again, we had the same situation. And it was a Friday evening or afternoon. And when I took him in there, pretty much the same thing again. They gave him fluids, but when I drove up, Jim being Jim, refused to go into a wheelchair. He got out, and this time we were driving his truck. Oh, and the start of driving his truck. He wouldn't ride in my truck, so he was going to drive to the ER. So we're going to the ER, and he turned on to the Arizona roads, almost missed the stop sign. We did kind of a fancy little turn onto the road. And I said to Jim, I said, you're turning all of these roads, 2-lane highways, into one-ways, indicating that he's driving on the wrong side of the road. So finally, he broke down. I said, you got to pull this thing over, and he let me drive. And driving his truck was a big deal. So he was very cautious about that and very concerned that, especially when he looks at my truck, he says, I can tell how you drive by how many dents are in your back license plate when you go to hook up the trailer. So he let me drive him in. We got into the ER, and this one, they got him on the fluids, but we pulled up his truck, and he got out, and he fell down. Rather than getting a wheelchair, they took some additional x-rays, and they found a spot or several spots in his lungs, whatever it was, but they were really concerned, and they did a CT scan. And the doctors wanted to keep him in and transport him to one of the bigger hospitals. Well, it's the Sabbath again. We said, no, they couldn't do anything anyway because it was the weekend, so we had to agree that we would take him in Monday morning early so that he could be checked for one of the bigger hospitals. So I would say, and also the agreement had to be that I would stay with him. So I spent the night with him, slept on the floor, kept him as well as I could under control. And we progressed from there. Monday morning we got up and we headed into the big hospital. And the one we were going to was the wrong hospital. So they said we needed to go to another hospital, and I kept calling them. And I don't do GPS and all this stuff. And so anyway, Jim's riding there, and I'm talking to the security people at the hospital getting directions. And we are driving all over, or I am anyway. So finally we get to the hospital, and we get Jim checked in there into the ER. And they said, it doesn't quite work the way you thought it was, that we thought we already had an appointment. So, and actually we did. I think God was driving. But at that point, Jim had accused me of taking him to a second-rate hospital. And that's kind of gives you his status of where he's at. So we get everything in there, and they are working with him. And I'm trying to think the progress from there. We were, they transferred him to the nursing home or whatever it was for recovery. And they told him when I went in there, they said, you have to drink water and you have to be able to walk down to the end of the hallway and back. Well, I got him to walk down the end of the hallway. But for water, he wanted to do it the fast way. He wanted another IV so he could take off again. That was the shortcut. And he just kept going with that. And we figured out that the nurses, one of the nurses, if they gave him a light back rub, that it would relieve the pain and he could get going again. And he just, all through that, he stayed strong. And at the same time that everything was going on, my wife was having some problems with health. And I had mentioned to Jim about the hours of prayer, that's when God answers prayer. So the 9, 12, and 3. So he called me back, 6, 8 hours later, and he said, tomorrow, all of us are going to be on the phone and we're going to do the 9th hour of prayer. So the morning prayer was to pray for her healing. And he just seemed like he would pick up stuff like that and he would share it, and he just was strong in what he was doing. No matter how he felt, he just kept in there and concerned about others. And he just, all I can say is I miss that man. We had a really good time in a short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
He said that was good.
Come on up. Here we go.
Thank you. Hi, Chris. I'm Marie, one of Jim's neighbors, and just one of his closest friends and fans. I just really, 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 really loved and appreciated Jim. In fact, it was a few months before you passed that had actually come here to hear you speak. He brought me to this church to hear you speak. Jim was just all heart. I mean, he was just all heart. He made sure that whatever you needed, it didn't matter who you were, that he would be there to see to it that you got it. And one of the things he would always tell me, he'd be on my case about, he said, Marie, I told you, you don't go to anyone for anything before you come to me. I said, okay, Jim, okay, I'm serious. Nobody do you go to before you come to me. And that's how he responded, and that's how he acted, and that's how he treated people. He always made sure that if there was something you needed, he was there for you, and he didn't want you to feel like you needed to go anywhere else if he could help. It was just a blessing to be his friend. This summer when I was gone, I talked to him all the time when he was in the hospital, and we would just chat, and he was waiting for me to come back, and I was waiting for him to get well. One of the things that he told me in May before he left, before I left for the summer was that he said, Marie, I realized that what you said was true. And I said, what was that? Jim, what are you talking about? He said, I researched that shot, and what you said was true. And I said, oh, okay. And it was something to get an agreement out of Jim on anything, because he was always right. So I said, oh, okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean? And he says, really loud and abruptly, that means I'm not getting any more shots, and I'm not taking anyone else to get any more shots. I said, okay, good. Well, this was a blessing to me to hear that, because we had been talking to Jim a while about researching. It didn't matter if you took it. We weren't concerned about you taking it. All of us were just concerned that you research before you take it, And he finally got that. And so we were blessed. He loved this church. He loved the people that were here. He always talked about this church. He loved the ministry here. He loved the people, and he always wanted to serve. And that's what he did in our community. He served. He loved when we had our Shabbat dinners on Friday night. He liked having them at his house, and he liked for me to make salmon. He said, because he always got the biggest piece. He loved fish. It was like grilled salmon. So for sure, he got the biggest piece. And I said, well, Jim, you always get the biggest piece, even if it's at my house. He said, but I know, but I like you to do it at my house. I said, okay, no problem. And that was the relationship that we had. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful friend, just a wonderful advocate for the Lord. And I just love him and bless him. And I just say, my dear friend, please be at rest right now. Be at rest. We love you. Thank you. Amen. Thank you.
Okay, Chris Martin will be coming up.
Thank you for that introduction, Pastor. Yeah. I met Jim here at the church about 15 years ago, and it was actually on a work day that we used to have here quite a bit, where we were raking the gravel, fixing the lights, and doing all kinds of things out here. And so Jim and I decided we were going to rake the gravel or granite in the back. And I looked at, because somebody had piled some quarter-minus granite back there, which is like sand, and Jim and I decided we could do it ourselves. And then pretty soon we looked at each other and says, this is stupid. We can't do this. About that time, we had people that were at our church that had some great big machinery. And all of a sudden, they came around the corner, Danny and his sons. And all of a sudden, we said, good. And they took over and they raked everything back. Well, that was the beginning of my meeting with Jim, or Harold, as I love to call him. Love to call him. Once he told me his name was Harold, it was on, And so I called him Harold around women, men, didn't matter. I called him Harold. And they said, who are you talking about? That's Harold. Yeah, it's Harold. So he was one of the original members of the Sons of Thunder, the Bible study group that Jim alluded to earlier. He was in the original group with Mike Reardon, which I think that's why Mike doesn't come anymore. I'm not sure. Either that or it's the transportation difficulties. I'm not sure. He's given me all kinds of excuses. But anyway, he was there, and he was faithful, always faithful. He loved a lot of things, Chris, and you're right there at the top with God. And he loved coffee. He had his own coffee cup that he had to bring everywhere. Everywhere. And he would come by the shop, not to get anything done, not to spend any money, but just get the free coffee. And guys, can I help you? No, I know where it's at. And that's he just go get it. He just go get it. And but one of his other favorite things, Chris, was he had and I'm not sure exactly what the year was, but he had a green pickup, a green Silverado pickup. That he adored that truck until he took it to Mexico and decided to drive off a canyon. In Mexico. He totals his truck in Mexico. And so he was devastated by the loss of that truck. He loved that truck. And he loved cars and tires and everything. But he loved that truck. The other thing is, okay, you said, Amber, you don't know how he got his name, Jim?
Yeah, he told me, but it was so long ago I can't remember.
Well, the version that he told me, okay, and you can take it from there, was he was a little kid. And he goes to the playground in California as a little kid. And he's watching, I think it was basketball, and he said, this great big guy comes older kid comes up to him and says, "Hey, Jim." He looks around. "Jim." He looks around. So he says, "Get in here. We need another player so we can play." He said, "From then on, everybody called me Jim." And that's what I stuck with, Jim, everywhere. That's the end of that story. But
I didn't know that either.
yeah, well, we don't know what version he told everybody. But that's the one he told me, and that's the one I'm sticking with. But he was a really good friend. Enjoyed him immensely. He was stubborn beyond belief. And but he did it his way, and with no regrets. So we do miss him. Take care, Chris.
Well, thank you, Chris. Anybody else want to come up? Think about it. You'll have another opportunity a little bit later on. At this point, we got a slideshow of different pictures of Jim and his life, so you can go ahead and play it. All righty. There you go.
Before you hang up or anything, make sure I get to talk to the pastor for a little bit.
Okay, you will. Well, I had a couple of scriptures that I did want to share with everybody here. And, in the different times that I would be talking with Jim, and a lot of the times that we would talk, has to do with theological points of view and how would that connect with this one, and especially I knew when he had a love for the Jewish community, a love for God's chosen people, and wondering how things are going to be working out. And actually, right now, I thank God that he's not alive with everything that's going on right now over in the Middle East, because I know that would just really, really be troubling to him to see all that. And his Shabbat was just a big thing with him, and he loved that. And sometimes we would sit down and just talk about different things, and it would be like, okay, and he was just kind of wondering. I said, okay, well, here's the thing you have to think about. From the Jewish perspective, when you're looking at it this way, this is what you're seeing. Okay, from a Christian perspective, some of the key elements in this, we're looking at it from a different angle. And in the end, our Father in heaven is the same one. And we're looking to be with him in his kingdom forever. But while we're still working through this life right now, walking through it. In the book of 1 Corinthians, Saul of Tarsus, who a member of the Pharisees, who later becomes Paul, is talking to some people, a congregation of people, quite a large congregation of people, and some of this was all having to do with death and what's going to happen and what's going to happen after death and what all, everybody, a lot of people think about, what is this whole resurrection thing? What happens when all that happens? And for example, when we are later on, what kind of body are we going to have? How does all that transpire? And in this, you can see a lot of Jewish thought come out in the book of 1 Corinthians as he's trying to explain to people. And it ends up being, it's like a lesson in farming. A lot of it has to do because, you throw a seed in the ground or a grain into the ground, that's not what comes up out. What comes out is completely different. It doesn't look like it or resemble it in any way, shape, or form. And this is how life is. We come into this world, and in the 1 Corinthians, he writes about we're sown, we're put together in one way, in shame, but then we come up in the resurrection in glory. All this is just going to be so different. And so he goes to that, and there's different things, like there's different things of light. You have the light from the stars, way different from the light from our sun, way different from different things, and all of us, but you know what? God is the one who put them all together. And he has a purpose in every one of these things. But then he, later on, he gets to the point having to do with, okay, but how does all this come together? And he says, behold, I tell you a mystery. We're not all going to sleep, but we're all going to be changed. So many times when I've been standing there on the Mount of Olives there in Israel and looking at all these graves, they're like, it depends upon what time of day you're at. If the sun hits it just right, it looks like a mountainside of just white of all these Jewish graves that are sitting there. And they're there waiting for that to happen. It's kind of like, because they're going to see the resurrection they're like getting a front row seat to the resurrection, a front row seat what God's going to do at that point. And thinking about that, and he says, you know what, we're not all going to sleep, but we're all going to be changed. And he says, in a moment, a little bit tighter, in the twinkling of an eye. Yes. And it's at that last trumpet of God. And speaking with him, okay, what is he talking about, this last trumpet? Okay, well, this is what we're going to find. If you got to go back here into the beginning of our Bible and go look, and you're going to see. This has been God's plan all along. He knows what he's doing. From before he even created the foundations of this earth, his plan was already complete of what he was going to do. In the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at that last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound. And it says, then the dead are going to rise first, before the people who are alive. Me, myself, I'm thoroughly convinced we are the last generation before this event happens. I think we're coming around the home stretch. and we're going to be here. So those that have died and passed, well, what's going to happen with their body? It's going to come up, and it's going to come up different. No matter whether it's ashes right now, God is going to deal with that. And that's another thing, standing there on the Mount of Olives and just looking down and looking over and seeing that. And, again, different cultures, different society, as they lay their dead in there, and they're there, and there's like a venting process, and eventually they just carry the bones, and they put them in a mausoleum. And you know what? The thing is, when God is calling it, he's going to make that call when that last trumpet blast happens, and then all that comes back. And that's just an amazing thing to contemplate and see. But we who are still alive, the event's going to happen almost simultaneously, but the dead are going to come up first, and then we're going to join them in the air. This is God's plan. Right now, I was there, and when I broke the news to Jim, Jim, this is going to be it. You're right at the very end now. Because in his mind, he was still thinking, it's going to be a long, hard fight, but I'm going to try to make it back out and go home. But when I had to break the news to him to sit down, and by the way, sit down in a wheelchair, that was another experience, believe me. And I wheeled him off into a room where I could talk to him without TVs going and all that. But the thing in his mind that was still very sharp is, you know what? Even when I pass from here, that's not the end of it. That's not the end. This is just the hard part at the end. This is, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Okay? But Jim realized, I'm here at this portion. Well, you know what? After this short portion here, then I'm home. There's no more pain, no more sorrow. And this is the change part that he's talking about. As he's saying, I'm going to tell you a mystery. This isn't going to maybe make a whole lot of sense when he wrote it and they would read it in the churches. But as they would study it and think about, okay, then that's the culmination of this here. This is what's going to happen. This is what God's plan was all along. And now we're just being alive and walking it through. God has a plan for us. Each and every one of us, each and every day of our life. He knows when each and every one of us, it's going to be our time to come home. And really all that is a transition from this body of flesh, stepping into eternity. It's not the end, like a physical death of a human being is the end. It's not. It's really the beginning, because now you're launching into a time when there's no time, actually. There's just now, for all of eternity, never ending, never growing old. Wow, praise God. And through this first part here, I could say, well, praise God, because, it says, our bodies of flesh, they're not going into the kingdom of God, and praise God, because I won't have to put up with this thing anymore. And we get a new one. And, the Bible tells us, the question is, well, what's it going to be like? Well, we're not told exactly, but we know that we're going to be like Messiah. This is what it's going to be like. It's amazing. Our body is built from the dust of the ground. That's what it was made from, and to dust it will return. But what's inside of us, the part that's eternal, is not made of this. It's not made of flesh and blood. It's not made of the dust of the ground. It's spirit, and we're going to go be with God, and we're going to be like him. Not going to be him, but we're going to be like him. And that's when, this is the really awesome thing. Because we really don't know ourselves. We might think we know everything about us. We might think we know everything about our spouse or our children. It's going to be an amazing thing when we get to eternity. Now, the term in the scripture says, we will know as we are known. Short version, we're going to know the truth. Okay? We're going to know the actual truth. And we're also going to know the actual truth about God. There's a lot of things we can study. I've been studying the scriptures now for getting close to 50 years. There's still things in there that I think I know some of it, but there's still a lot of question on it about what it actually is. When we get there, we're going to know the whole thing. The part we need to know is for here. The part that's still somewhat of a mystery. In the scripture, God took certain people and gave them a preview. You know, I'm thinking of Isaiah, and he literally took him to the throne room. And it wasn't like he was like, wow, so excited. You know what? Because if you read his scripture, if you read what he wrote, and especially if you read it in the language that he wrote it, it was more like, I don't belong here. I can't be here. Literally, it says, I'm going to dissolve now. I'm going to evaporate because I can't be here. I'm a man of unclean lips. I come from a whole tribe of people of unclean lips. I don't belong here. Because you can look at things and realize each and every one of us, we know the things that we grapple with. We know the things that maybe trap us. And you know what? That's the reason God is in his forgiveness. The Bible doesn't say God has love. The Bible says God is love. That's part of what he is. And it's because of what he did, of who he is and what he is, that he did what he did through sending Messiah into the world. And that we can relate with him from a different perspective. And it's going to be a great day when we get there. When we, I don't know, like breathe in and it's like, oh, this is different. And then we're there. With Jim, he wrote out that last part that was a little hard. And when I went to go see him in the hospital, and we talked and we prayed, and again, we ended up talking about Sabbath and different things, and like Passover and different things we're talking about. But you know what? When I went to go see him in the other facility in that home, because I've walked with a lot of people through the end of life, and I could see that I could see the face that was there, and it was like if it's 2 weeks, it's going to be that I don't even see it being going that long, but he's at the end, and that's okay, because after that he's with God, and he's celebrating with God, and that's the thing that we have, and that's the thing that God offers to each and every one of us, to know him, not just know about him. Knowing about him is one thing, and that's pretty good. But that's not going all the way home. To know God in the fullness of who he is, that he would cast that light in our being to be able to get to know him. That's a pretty marvelous thing. It's way past even being able to completely walk it through. That God, who's outside of the whole universe, that he would pay attention to us on this little dust speck of a planet. And how much of a dust speck are we individually on top of that little dust speck? And then he thinks about us. And we have proof that he thinks about us, even right now, if we're still breathing, because our breath belongs to him. Every breath that we have, it belongs to him. He's thinking about us, and he has us. And the offer to us is that we can be with him forever. And not just make it in by the skin of our teeth, to make it in there where we can rejoice with him for all of eternity. So that's the thought on that. And if you have any questions about that a little later, come and see me. I'll be glad to sit and talk to you. Pastor Leo, I'm sure, would be glad to sit and talk about it with you. Right now, before I close, I want to give any more of you one more opportunity if you want to come up and just share some memories with Jim.
Thanks. So for any of you that don't know who I am, my name's Amber. I got this weird call like 2 months ago from, I don't even remember who, because so many people called me within that week, that Jim was sick. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Thank you so much. No, you need to come down here. No, I have to work. I just got off a 2-week vacation. I have to work. No, you really need to get down here. Sure. So I get in the car after a 2-week trip across the United States to get back in the car to go see Jim. Now, mind you, I told you that my dad and Chris's dad were best friends. My dad was Chris's dad's boss, so they worked at Goodyear. When my dad got hurt from Goodyear, Jim followed him, and they went to Treadco to work together. And then he actually came and helped my dad with his own business off and on. And I'll tell you a funny story about crashing a car. Jim is backing up my trailer into the back of my dad's house. We have a fire hydrant in front of the neighbor across the street, okay? All of a sudden, there's yellow paint all over the truck, and my dad's like, who the heck did that? I'm like, I didn't do it. Now, I did a lot of things to those trucks, but I didn't do that one. Jim had backed it up and hit the front of the thing and backed it all the way in. My dad said, I don't think I need your help anymore, Jim. I'm good. That was the last time I think that Jim ever drove those truck and trailers. They were a big truck and trailer. But that call I got from all of you ladies and all of you out here, thank you guys so much. Because if I had not known, I wouldn't have been able to tell Chris. And Chris lost touch with his dad up until the point where he got sick. There were months where they didn't talk. So once I was able to reach out to Chris, then we reconnected. And we've helped each other through this process. And that was the only way we could do it together. So thank you guys all for that phone call. And all of you have been so kind coming out here and handling things. You guys have all been helpful. I truly, truly appreciate it. Oh, sorry. I said I truly, truly appreciate their help. You got it? Oh, sorry. I put you on the Bible. My bad. Yeah, that was probably a bad point, huh?
Chris needs to know that every Shabbat, Jim prayed for him.
Oh, that was really cool. Did you hear that, Chris?
No, I'm sorry. I'm having trouble hearing. We got some stuff going on in the background.
He said that in every Shabbat, your dad prayed for you every time. So he wanted you to know that, okay? There you go. He said, thank you, guys. But yeah, Jim has known me since I was a kid. Chris and I grew up together, and the last 2 months were hard. I'm not going to lie. It was very hard to see him so sick so quick. I mean, literally within a month and a half, I get a call and he's gone. It was insanely crazy how quickly that process went. And now I'm kind of jealous because now he's up there with my dad and everyone else up there, and I'm kind of jealous, okay? I'm not going to lie. I'm still down here, and I'm like, dude, what is up? But just wanted to say thank you to everyone. Toby's in a great place with Gloria and Gary, and they're going to take care of Toby for us, and we couldn't ask for a better person to take care of her, so we appreciate that. And that's pretty much it. I'm done. So thank you again, guys.
Thank you, Amber.
Thanks.
Before I close it up, is there anybody else that wanted to come up? Anybody here? Up, come on up.
I miss him. And I know you all do too, or he wouldn't be here. He was a light. He was a light in the darkness. And I was his, what do you call it? Kryptonite, he said. I went, seriously? I don't know about that, but I remember he invited me to church here, and I got to sit right over there, and I enjoyed the service. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Chris, I'm sorry I never got to meet you, only through the favor of your dad and the wonderful things that he had to say about you. Gosh, I loved the Sabbaths with him. I got to sit next to him. And yes, he prayed for you, as I do for my children. I didn't get near enough time with your dad. He purchased something for me the last time I seen him. And I hold it very special. He was going to come up and see me. I live in Montana now. It's my other home there. I used to live in Florence, right close to him. He was right behind me. And so we could walk to each other's place. And I love how he taught me how to play Mexican train. We had so much fun. Yeah, he taught you too. I hear you. You can relate to it. Well, I didn't talk a whole lot until he, brought out the wine. And after about a bottle or so, I kind of got a little more yakety. So we had some pretty good conversations. But
I think about, I kept waiting for him to come to Montana this last summer. And I tried to prepare my home for him. And I took pictures of the porch and I'd send it to him. And I says, this is where we're going to have our coffee in the morning. And we're going to sit and visit, and we're going to play Mexican Train, and we're going to have some fun. And we're going to enjoy Montana. But he tried. He tried to make it as hard as he could, but God had another purpose for him. And that was, evidently his purpose was taken care of here. And so he called him home. And I just miss him. And I pray for you all. Thank you.
Well, I did have a couple of memories myself of Jim. And I do remember that truck going down to Mexico and how it broke his heart of what happened with all that. And I spent a lot of time in prisons in Pinal County and in other places. And one thing that he would talk to me about was because of where Chris is at, and then how to relate to people that are in that situation, and how to encourage them and encourage them to be doing and not just sit there and passing time. That they have to have a purpose of what's going on in there. And believe it or not, every time I've seen this picture, before I came into full-time ministry, I used to be in commercial tire sales and commercial tire business. And in fact, that company there was one of our main competitors. But later on, when I went into business for myself, Treadco was actually one of my clients. They were one of the companies that I dealt with. And so that was pretty neat. And I grew up, for the most part, there in Southern California. Lived right next door to Costa Mesa there in Santa Ana, California. And in talking with Jim, and that's how I knew him. I didn't know about these other names at all till close to the end, actually. But you knew what he thought when you're talking with him. He very rarely would be beating around the bush. It was pretty straightforward with what he thought. You can have conversations, but his point of view is going to be right down one lane, but he could back it up. Usually, his why he felt that way. And some of our greatest conversations actually had to do with theology and okay, what does this mean when it says this? Does it mean exactly? I said, well, one thing you got to keep in mind. You're reading in English, and you're reading actually from an American English perspective. You got to go back up a little bit here and just get a little bit different perspective. And he loved Tuesday mornings with the men. He loved Tuesday mornings sitting there and talking. Again, as Smitty was sharing, if he had something to say, he didn't do it all that often, but when he did have something to say, it was like he was going to be adamant about it because he felt very strongly about it. One of the things I know that he was always was at the forefront of his mind from the years that I've known him was his son and where his son is at and what's going to happen. And especially, I'm going to say, I don't know, the last probably 5 years or so, he gained, I guess, a different perspective and a different level of interest in the Jewish community and what's going on in the Jewish community. And he just loved that and loved being around that, loved being with the food, and he loved salmon. And obviously, and what? And wine, okay. The wine kind of loosened things up a little bit. And at times, driving could be a little challenge. Backing up into things could be a little bit of a challenge. But you know what? Whether he was helping out at the schools in Eloy, which he did a lot. Whether it was helping out here, and I can't tell you how many different times at our church, for example, whether we were going to do a mission trip, whether our youth, our high school, and junior high, were going to go on a mission trip or do something, a retreat, that he would come talk to me off to the side, just me and him, and just give me money to sponsor somebody to be able to go. He was almost all the time doing that. Whenever something was going to go on, hey, Pastor Robert, is there somebody or a family or something that's struggling with this? Are they going to be able to go? And then he would say, this is their sponsorship. I'm going to take care of it. Only under one condition. You don't tell them. that was just him. And a very good friend of mine, Mike Brinken, I call him Chef. He owns, Big House Cafe and a catering business and a couple other things. I knew Mike did a lot of outreaches up in the Phoenix area to homeless. I didn't realize, even believe it or not, till after Jim passed, that he used to take a lot of loads of clothes to Mike to be able to distribute when Mike would do his big outreaches up there in the valley. And Mike wanted to be here today, but he's over in Albuquerque getting his father transported back here to be in Casa Grande because he's getting older and he's had a couple falls, and the rehab was not going as well as because it's kind of the same thing when I would visit Jim in the rehab place there. They can be a little ornery and not necessarily want to cooperate with the way they wanted to do things. So, and wheelchairs are things also with Chef's dad. So it's like, hey, I'm just going to bring him home, so he can be close to his kids and his grandkids. Which, hey, I can perfectly understand that. But he wanted to be here because he wanted to share with everybody that would be here today. You know what? Here's something that happened, and you know what? He didn't realize it for a while. Who was bringing all these clothes, because he would just bring loads of clothes and they'd just be in bags. And then when they would come in the morning, they're like, wow. And then later on, he found out who was bringing it there. And it was Jim all the time. That's just kind of who he was. And miss him. But you know what? He got his promotion. He got the ultimate promotion. And given the opportunity to come back, I don't think he's going to take it. He will just stay there and he'll wait for us. Amen. Well, we're now at the closing portion of the service, and I've asked Pastor Leo to come up and do the closing prayer. When we're done with this, out into the foyer, there's some snacks and some finger foods out there for us to just spend a little bit of time and sharing with one another. Okay, Pastor Leo. for being here, and feel free to come out into our foyer here and just share some time together. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. God bless you. All right.